Hi all, welcome back to my channel DataTalks.Club. So in this lecture, I'm going to discuss about how to access your applications running inside your containers from outside world. So suppose I have a Docker host. Let's say this is my Docker host, which is running container inside this Docker host. Let's say this is my container C1, which is running my application Apache web server, which needs to be accessed from internet. Let's say this is my ISP, and this application which is running inside the container C1 need to be accessed on internet. So as we all know, the container C1 runs with something called private IP address. So to access it from outside world, we need either public IP address or we need to perform port forwarding with private IP address. Now, public IP address is not really a better option due to the security issues, while private IP addresses can't be provided to the end users to access the applications. So, only option to go with is port forwarding with private IP addresses. Now, let's understand how communication happens from container interface to internet using the Docker host machine. So, whenever we create a Docker host machine, by default, interface card Docker 0 bridge network gets created. So let's take that Docker 0 bridge network here. Let me write it with a different pen so that it will be visible. So let's say Docker 0 interface, or you can call it as a bridge network. By default, IP address for this bridge network or Docker 0 starts with 172.17.0.1/16. This Docker 0 or bridge network is also known as gateway. Now, why this particular Docker 0 or bridge network is called as gateway? So whenever a new container gets created on this particular Docker host, let's say a container C2 or container C3, all the containers will get the IP addresses assigned from this bridge network, and the containers which are connected to this bridge network will get the IP addresses. in the range of 172.17.0.x/16, same range. So this bridge network, or you can call it as a Docker 0, is just like a router which are having two interfaces. One interface is going to your containers, another interface is going to your Docker host machine interface, which is connected to your nothing but an internet. So this Docker 0 bridge network is connected to C1, C2, C3, and this Docker 0 bridge network also connects to Docker host machine ETH0, or you can call it as a internet facing NIC card, and this ETH0 connects to ISP. Let's say this ETH0 is having the IP address 192.16.1.10, and these containers will get the IP addresses from Docker 0 or a bridge network. So the IP address what container C1 will get is the next IP of the Docker 0 bridge network, 172.17.0.2. The container 2 will get the IP address 172.17.0.3. So it's keep moving forward like this. Now let's understand this workflow with another example. Suppose we have a Docker host where we have a container, let's say a container C1, which is running with application Nginx. Let me also mark this as Docker host. Next, here we have Docker 0, or bridge network, and here I have Docker host ETH0 port or interface internet NIC card, and here I have internet, and this ETH0 is connected with internet. The one interface of Docker 0 or bridge network is connected to ETH0, and another interface is connected to container C1, which is running application Nginx. Now let's say this Nginx application is running on port 80, which is a default port. Okay, and this application need to be accessed on internet, or you can say we are running here a command www.google.com. We have defined a process inside this container so that it will keep pinging into the Docker www.google.com. Now, this particular request, it will be forwarded to Docker 0. Then Docker 0 or a bridge network will try to check this particular request within local environment. If this request can be fulfilled within the local environment, it will be forwarded back to container directly from here. If not, it will be forwarded to ETH0. Then ETH0 will try to check this request on internet. If found, this will be responded back to Docker 0, and Docker 0 will again push it back to container C1 and Nginx. So this workflow will be like from container to Docker 0 port, then on to the private ETH0 port or internet facing NIC card, and then over to the ISP. So once response will be provided back via ISP to the ETH0, it will be forwarded back to Docker 0, which is the bridge network, and from bridge network to the container. Now, the question is, if you want to access this Nginx application from outside, how we will achieve this? For this, we need to use something called port forwarding concept. So any application running inside the container, in this case as Nginx on private IP address 172.17.0.2, which needs to be accessed publicly, need to use the port forwarding concept. How this port forwarding happens, let's see within the lab environment. Let's try this out quickly within the lab environment. I have already installed Docker on this particular machine. Let me just show you. Docker -- version and the status of Docker systemctl status Docker. So you can see it is active and running. Let's clear the window. So first we will create a Docker container which will run the Nginx application. For that, let's run the command docker container run -itd -- name. The name of the container I will give as Nginx container 01, and the image name is Nginx. So here -itd runs the container interactively but in detached mode, so it keeps running in the background. Nginx container 01 is the name of the container, and Nginx is the image what I am going to take it for this particular container. Let's hit enter. To check if the container is running and got created successfully, let's run the command docker container ps-e. It will show me all the containers. So I can see the container is up and running. It is up from past 13 seconds and the name of the container is Nginx container 01. Now port 80/TCP. That's the default port where the Nginx listens. But right now our container has no connectivity to the outside world because we haven't set up any port forwarding yet. If you want to check the container's IP, let's run the inspect command. Docker container inspect and the container ID of the Nginx container 01. So here I can see the IP address of the Nginx container 01. So usually it is the next IP address after the Docker bridge network Docker 0, which is usually 172.17.0.1/16 range. Now to test internal access inside the Docker host, let's use the curl command. Curl 172.17.0.2 and the port number is 80. So I have used the IP address of Nginx container 01 and the port 80 to access the Nginx application. So here we can see the message, welcome to Nginx. This sends the request directly to the Nginx server inside the container where we will get the response successfully. Now, if you want to access the container from outside your Docker host, you need something called port forwarding. First, let's remove the existing container. Docker container ps-e. So I can see the container is up and running from the past 19 minutes. So we have to stop this container. Docker container stop and the ID of the container. So container is stopped. Now I can remove it. Docker container rm. Now let's again the run command. Docker container ps-e. So no container is running. Let me clear the window. Next, recreate the container, but this time with port forwarding enabled. Let's run the command. Docker container run -itd -name Nginx container 01. I have taken the same name as old container -p 8090:80 and the image name is Nginx. So -p tells Docker to forward the ports. 8090 is the port on your host machine, which is your Docker host, where the Linux is installed, where the Docker packages are installed. Port 80 is inside the container where Nginx is running. Let's hit enter and the container is created. Now let's verify. Docker container yes. So we can see it is up and running from the past 12 seconds. Here is the container ID and we can see the mapping of ports. Now let's see the IP address of this particular Docker container. So for that, let's run the inspect command. Docker container inspect and the container ID. So the IP address of the container is 172.17.0.2. Now to verify internal access, let's curl 172.17.0.2 colon 80. So we can see here, welcome to Nginx successfully. Now if you want to test external access, let's see the IP address of this Docker host. So the IP address of the Docker host is 192.168.1.5. Let's open the Chrome browser. Let's use the port number as 8090. Hit enter. So we can see the welcome to Nginx. So it's proving the port forwarding is working perfectly fine. Let's try another example. This time with an Apache web server container. Let me clear the console. Let's run the command docker container run -itd -name Apache server 01. I will use the parameter -p. This time I'm going to use port 8080 and the port 80 and the image name as httpd. Let's run the command. So it is not able to find the image locally, so it is pulling from the Docker Hub. Let's verify docker container ps-a. Okay, so I can see the container got created and up from past 8 seconds. So you can see here port forwarding is also there. It is forwarding the port 8080 on your host to port 80 inside the container where the Apache listens. Now to get the IP address of this particular container, let's run the command docker container inspect and the container ID of the Apache server. Hit enter. So the IP address of Apache web server container is 172.17.0.3. Let's verify the internal access. Curl 172.17.0.3 and the port 80. So we can see it works. If you want to verify if it's working on the Docker host, let's see the IP address of this Docker host. Let's come down. Okay, so this is the IP address of the Docker host. Let me just copy it. And this time the port number is 8080. So it says it works. So you should be able to see the default Apache welcome page. That means everything is working great. So that's it for this video. We will continue with more in the next lecture. Till then, stay connected and keep learning. Don't forget to like, comment and subscribe to the channel for the latest videos. Stay tuned. Thank you.